we have Congressman Mike Coffman,
who
knows a thing or two about the military, is on hold here, too.
Okay, let's go to the Congressman. Congressman, welcome.
Yeah, hey,
welcome
this
to the
is
program.
Julie and Chuck. Thank you for calling in.
Hey, hi, no problem.
So what do you want to weigh in on here?
Well, I think we were going to talk about Iraq a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the Middle East.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I tell you what, I think it's I don't think it is as it appears to us. I think the reality on the ground might be just a little bit different. That I think at the end of the day, and I was in Fallujah, and I'm sure Congressman Beaupre's probably been there as well, at Camp Fallujah from a time or two, and it's the sacrifices that we made were pretty incredible there. The big fighting was before I got there in 2004. I didn't get there until 2005. But I think it's a tragedy because of the fact that the Maliki government, the Shiite-dominated government, has not reached out to be an inclusive government with that Sunni minority that dominates Al-Anbar province. And I think the net result is they've created fertile ground for Al-Qaeda to move back in there as a result of that. So,
and what's the solution, if any? I mean, quite frankly, either the Sunnis were oppressing the Shia, or the Shia oppresses the Sunni. I mean, it seems somebody's oppressing somebody, and it doesn't seem that government's going to change. It's certainly decided that its best ally is Iran. So I don't see. Do you see any hope? I mean, I must admit, it's kind of hard to see how this is going to change for the better.
Well, I think the only hope is this: that the Maliki government realizes that in order to if it has any hope whatsoever of ending the violence, and they dominate the government. They're 60% of Iraq in terms of population. It's a sectarian struggle that they really have to bury the hatchet with that Sunni Arab minority, which is only 20% of the population. Another 20% is Kurds to the north. That under Saddam Hussein, that 20% really dominated the country. They got the lion's share of the oil wealth of the country. Al-Anbar province obviously really benefited from Saddam Hussein's rule, and now it seems that the minute we left in 2011, that there was retribution on behalf of the Maliki government and against the Sunnis and not being an inclusive government. And I think that, they created fertile ground for Al-Qaeda to move in there and the population to, I'm not saying welcome them. I think there's still a lot of friction. But I think the Sunnis have to see a path forward where they're really a part of this government.
Well, and what do we do about that then?
Well, we certainly made mistakes in the past. I mean, I would go way back, and it's water under the bridge that we should have. I question whether we should have gone there in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's a. I don't. In my mind, obviously, hindsight is always 20/20. It was a big mistake, but what I believe that once we made the commitment to be there, that we had an obligation to bring it to what I would call a just conclusion. And I think that the administration was too quick to try to, as in much of their foreign policy we can see before the 2012 election, they were trying to create political narratives. And even if the facts on the ground didn't contribute to that political narrative, that was okay. They went ahead anyway. We know what happened in Benghazi as a result of that. Yeah. And Iraq was a part of the political narrative, too, that the administration got us out of the war in Iraq, that brought the war to an end. And so in wanting that clean political narrative, there was no accommodation for residual forces in the country, some type of very limited presence, if anything, just of a symbolic nature to say that we're still here from the standpoint of stability to the country. And the administration pretty much sabotaged the discussions on the status of forces agreement to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah,
with the Iraqi government.
That's what I've heard, that they had no intention of really having a status of forces. I mean, they kind of manufactured the dispute over indemnification of troops involved in criminal proceedings. But in fact, they only wanted to leave about 3,000, which is really kind of more of a sitting duck than an effective fighting force. And they were happy when the Maliki government refused to do it, because then they could pretend that it was them and not Obama or the Obama administration was in fact causing it.
Sure, absolutely. It was a setup. What they did is the Department of Defense kept lowering the number, and to the point where the government of Iraq felt that it wasn't worth expending the political capital
right.
For the indemnification issue, to say that American forces are not subject to the laws of Iraq, that they're subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice from the United States. But you're absolutely right that the administration had planned that basically sabotaged the negotiations to make sure that they would have an out on the basis of that status of forces agreement in terms of whether or not U.S. forces fell under the jurisdiction of Iraq or not, where I think clearly a larger number that would represent a presence that would be at least symbolic, that where the Iraqi government would be able to expend that political capital and saying, yeah, we'll swallow our pride and they won't be subject to Iraqi law. At the end of the day, they weren't willing to do that, and the administration didn't want that.
Well, let me, Congressman, ask you one final question before we let you go here. And that, I mean, what next? I mean, what do we do now?
Well, let me get one more in there. I got to spend some time in Lebanon when I was younger, sometime in what was Yugoslavia, and the idea of an inclusive government is so foreign in some cases that power wins, and if one group can impose their power of others, that's what acts as the grease for unification, and the kind of the Western Europe or American idea of let's have an inclusive
democracy.
Group, is really foreign. It certainly was foreign in Lebanon, where the factions were beginning just to break apart then, and certainly foreign in Yugoslavia, where you just feel the underlying tensions, and that once that heavy hand of Tito or whoever was in charge in Lebanon at the time was lifted, things were going to explode.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But the caveat that from a Sunni Arab perspective, and that's who I worked with when I was in Iraq, in Ramadi, Fallujah, and then later on in the Western Euphrates River Valley, in agricultural areas, that to the Sunni Arabs, I think that their leverage, unfortunately, is violence, and that. And so that they have to convince the Maliki government that violence will continue until there is an inclusive government. So, certainly absent of that, there would probably be no accommodation on the side of the Maliki government. And I don't think, from a congressional perspective, when I look at my colleagues, they're buying the Maliki narrative on this. And the Maliki narrative from the Iraqi government is this is a fight between the good guys, the Iraqi government, and Al-Qaeda. I think it's much deeper than that, and I think, at the end of the day, it's a political tension,
right?
That in not having an inclusive government that has allowed Al-Qaeda entry into this, and so what do I get from my colleagues here? We've got to send military aid to the Iraqi government. Well, first of all, it's an oil-rich country. I think they can buy it. We're going to go in debt to supply it. I don't think we ought to be doing that. I think those days ought to be over.
All right, Congressman, thank you for your
Very
time.
much.
I appreciate you calling in.